Um, our speakers today are Anna and Teresa. Teresa is the Head of Library Systems and Digital Services at Getty Research Institute, and Anna is in Digital Collections at RMIT. This presentation is a repeat of the presentation they did at Luna in May this year. So I'll just hand it over to the curators.
Thanks, Helen. Welcome everyone to our presentation. It was very strange not being able to see anyone, but I guess I'll cope. I'm Anna. Are you there, Teresa?
Yes, I am here, Teresa Soreau.
And we are going to talk to you today about managing and preserving digital assets with Rosetta and the AlmaD. I'll go first. I'm sure, this being ANZREG and not a Luna, you've got a little bit more of an idea of who RMIT are, but I'll give you a little snapshot of us anyway. RMIT is Australia's biggest university by student load, or it was when I wrote this slide, with about 83,000 students, full-time equivalent. We're quite big geographically as well. We've got 3 campuses here in Melbourne, City campus, Brunswick campus, and yes? And Bandura campus, which is where I'm coming to you from now. 2 campuses in Vietnam, in Hanoi and in Saigon City. Postgrad Research Centre in Barcelona, and partner institutions across Southeast Asia. We are a mixed sector educator, which means we do both higher ed and vocational training. Although I think we're about 80-20 higher ed to vocational. We are very keen on industry partnerships and getting our students ready for the workforce, which our motto is ready for life and work. And a very important part of our teaching and learning is that ever-growing amount of courses and full programs are offered completely online. Digital collections, this is my lot. So my team consists of me, digital collections librarian, my team of 3 library officers, and we also work with a lot of other staff in my area, including my supervisor of copyright digitisation and repositories, the applications librarian, who helps me with a lot of technical support and sort of ex libris wrangling, the university archivist, our permissions officer for copyright help, metadata standards librarian, and the entire library resources and access team. They're the team that handle all of our licensed resources in the university. Our collections are a mix of born digital and digitised. So born digital are things like digital photography collections, the Business Insights Archive, which was a defunct database, which then, because we purchased perpetual access, gave us all of their PDFs. Learning resources, student work, and digitised. This tends to come in the form of digitisation projects that we do annually. So we've got a collection of artefacts, photos, and digitised books from the Emily McPherson School of Domestic Science. Also digitised a lot of past exam papers, which are by far and away our most popular collection. A lot of off-air audio and video. This is, in layman's terms, stuff we've taped off the TV and made available under Part VA of the Copyright Act online for our students to watch, or for academics to use in learning and teaching. Digitised architecture slides, some lab slides, all of our eReserve collections, so all of our course readings are online, as well as our alt formatting for print disabled or visually impaired students. and an archive full of library photos. A little bit about our workflows, what we do with digital content. So our big project using the AlmaD at RMIT is transferring our digital collections from our legacy system, which is Aquella, which some of you might use or might have used. We extract the metadata, which in Aquella is in custom Dublin core format. We remap it to Alma's Dublin core format. Alma's got a much stricter Dublin core schema than the custom fields we have in our old system. Or we create suitable MARC records, which we do for books and for films. We convert all of this to XML, which is a fun process. Create digital collections in Sandbox and in our live environments. Create the import profiles, test uploads. If everything works, which it rarely does the first time, we duplicate the process and upload everything to Alma. We either use a digital uploader function or our S3 API. We fix any errors. Again, always something goes wrong. Run a job to unsuppress everything and then publish through to Primo. Uploading new content is a similar process. So we create, remap, harvest metadata from somewhere. If it's like a photography collection or something like that, will be in Dublin Core. If it's a book collection or a film or something like that, if there is MARC data available, we will use MARC. Again, transform into XML, create the collections, the import profiles, and upload and publish through to Primo. I should mention at the moment that Dublin Core records are not publishing through to Primo. We're working on it with Ex Libris. We were supposed to work in the August release, we've now been told September release. Colleagues at the University of Waikato in New Zealand have given us a hand and we're testing publishing now. All right, Teresa, on to you.
All right. So I'm going to kind of go through a similar set of information about the Getty Research Institute, which is where I am from. Next slide, please. So the GRI is located in Los Angeles, California. It's one of the 4 programs under the umbrella of the J. Paul Getty Trust, which also includes the Getty Museum, the Getty Foundation, and the Getty Conservation Institute. And our mission is to further knowledge and advance understanding of the visual arts and their various histories. Our research library and special collections of rare materials and digital resources serve an international community of scholars and the interested public. Slide. So, in terms of digital collections, our team consists of me, head of library systems and digital services. I spend about a quarter of my time working on the digital collections. Our systems librarian, who has 4 systems to support, so he spends a quarter of his time on the system. And then we have a team of people to deposit content into Rosetta. So we have 3 library assistants who pretty much spend their day depositing content into Rosetta. And then we have 2 digital archivists who also acquire content from physical media and do lots of other digital archivist work, digital curation work. So they spend a portion of their time. And just as Anna, we have lots of associated staff that help with project planning and project management, creating metadata, rights, and then our central IT department actually manages the storage. As far as our collections are concerned, we also have Born Digital and digitized collections. We just started loading Born Digital content now about 6 months ago. We have about 10 terabytes to load at this point, and it's constantly increasing. So we're kind of working through a backlog. We've got already about 1 terabyte in Rosetta. Most of the Born Digital content is our institutional business records. So, records that are created at the Getty, throughout the entire Getty, from maybe the publications department or the exhibitions or education. And so these are records that are mainly internal, but born digital, so they need to be preserved in Rosetta. And we also are now acquiring more special collections that have hard drives or computers with them. And we also have a lot of legacy physical media, zip drives and jazz drives and SideQuest drives and CDs and all of that kind of stuff. So we're really pushing to get that off of the physical media and into Rosetta. For digitized content, we currently have about 140 terabytes of data in Rosetta, and that includes photographs, prints, any manuscript or correspondence collections, audio and video, and some PDFs. Slide. So our workflows are quite different for digitized versus born digital. For digitized content, we have a digitization on demand process. So that means researchers and staff and scholars can request that we digitize something. And if it's a small enough amount of material, then we'll do that, if it's a book or a manuscript or a small collection of photographs or something. So that's one way items get digitized. Any audiovisual material that needs to be accessed must be reformatted before it is. And so we have a lot of AV requests. And we have a lot of AV collections, and we're acquiring more all the time. So that's a large portion. And then we also do mass digitization projects that usually come with some kind of project funding or project staff. And that would be to digitize the entirety of an archive, that might produce 50,000 images at the end of 1 or 2 years. So all of those workflows are slightly different, but the kind of gist of it is that we try to create a list, a shot list for the photographer that would have all of the material, all of the items that we would expect them to photograph or to reformat in the case of AV. We also take our descriptive metadata from a MARC record, either in ALMA or EAD finding aid in archive space, and we map it to a locally defined set of Dublin Core and DC Terms elements. And then for this workflow, we actually combine the shot list, which includes a list of all the files that are included in the object, plus the descriptive metadata that describes the object, into a METS record. And this is so that we can provide hierarchical structure. And just to give you an illustration of that, you want to make sure that all of the pages or leaves of this manuscript are shown, in the correct order, and that you have the cover followed by the, front end papers, et cetera, et cetera. So, and sometimes there are foldouts, or a lot of times the collections are loose. And so they're, we want to be able to provide a hierarchical structure. So we use METS as our deposit standard. And then we deposit them into Rosetta and publish to Primo most of the time. For born digital records, it's different because it's generally only for preservation purposes. We're not, in most cases, providing access to these. They're more internal business records for the department to consult in the future. And so we're not in control of the file formats or the file names or the way that they're arranged. And so we do a couple of things. We do rename the files. If they include any non-standard characters or characters that might cause a problem in the future, we replace a certain set of characters with an underscore. And then we run the set of files through Droid, which helps us get a list of the files and a checksum and some other information. And then we can use that Droid report to create a CSV file that Rosetta understands. We zip all of the files together, and we can deposit that into Rosetta. And what Rosetta will do for us then is it will reconstruct the hierarchy. So imagine, your own hard drive and how you organize your files. The way you've organized them gives you information. And so you would want to retain that as part of the archive. So Rosetta will then take the file path and reconstruct the whole directory structure for us so that it's maintained. Next slide. And Anna's going to do a little kind of comparison between kind of what AlmaD can give you and what Rosetta can give you.
Okay. So this is a comparison. We want to sort of make it clear we're not doing like a straight comparison, this is better, this is worse. They're quite different systems and we use them for different purposes. So what our intention was with this presentation was to sort of explore the features and the limitations of each system to just help you decide like which one you want to use, or if you want to use both, or if you want to run away. We added this slide at Aluna, having just been to a presentation on AlmaD Rosetta integration. We wrote most of this before we knew about the integration, and neither of us are using it at the moment, so we're just not addressing that today. Okay, so the shared features of the AlmaD and Rosetta, you can both publish to Primo and suppress from Primo. I've just realized, Teresa, was this your slide or was this my slide?
Oh, you can give it.
Okay, since I've started. Both have end user deposit functions. Both can use REST APIs. In both, you can deposit any file format that you like, although the viewers are only going to render a subset of common ones. And in both, you have ability to assign your digital object to collections and publish that collection hierarchy through to Primo. Okay.
So this is kind of where we get to the fact that it's not apples to apples, because Rosetta is a preservation system. And so I'm going to focus here on what features Rosetta has that aren't expected to be in AlmaD, but still it's important to illustrate the differences. So Rosetta provides a validation stack, which does 5 processes for you when you put content into Rosetta. So it can either calculate a checksum for you or verify checksums that you give it. There are 4 different types available. It identifies the file format, and that's not just saying it's a TIFF or it's a JPEG or it's a PDF. It actually goes into the technical header of the file and uses the signature, the file signature, which it compares against a database file format registry called Pronom, which is managed by the National Archives of the UK. And it has a format ID that it assigns to that file. And so that's useful in the future because you want to know specifically which version of TIFF this format or this file is. And that can help you with your preservation actions in the future. It also it extracts technical metadata from many different file types. Generally it uses Jove, although you can create different types of metadata extraction plugins. And this really helps because it will try to validate the file against the standard. And so if, for instance, your TIFF has a date format that's non-standard, you might, it will alert you at least to tell you that the format of the date is not what is prescribed as, in the technical specification for TIFF. And so you can decide kind of what to do with that information. And also if can tell the file is corrupt, let's say because it didn't transfer all the way, then that's also a really good indication. It can also do virus checking. We currently do this kind of in a pre-processing step outside of Rosetta. But then the last one here, risk assessment, is really interesting, especially for born digital collections, because you can say like a certain format is a risk for your institution. That can be because you decide you don't want to preserve that type, maybe you don't have any software to render it, or you consider it proprietary format and you would prefer to create a new copy of it in a more open standard, or whatever, kind of however your policies are, you set that in Rosetta as a rule. And then as you deposit content, especially born digital, it will let you know when those files are included in your deposits, which is important because we have some objects in Rosetta that have 10,000 files in them. Obviously we're not going to be looking at individual files. Another preservation function is that it has provenance events, which are kind of related to premise, and it does track everything that happens to the object after the time of deposit. So anyone edits the metadata, anyone deletes a file, adds a file, replaces a file, moves things around, it's going to create a new version of the METs, and it's going to say, what the action was that made it create a new version, and who, which user performed that action. So that's really important for tracking and kind of authenticity and auditing. Next slide. And then in terms of viewers, you have choice of more than 10 viewers out of the box, and you can create plugins or get, plug in different viewers. It provides really robust access rights. So you could have access rights based on an IP address, a username, concurrent, so you can only have a certain number of people accessing at once. You can have retention periods where Rosetta will say, you've retained this for 10 years, what do you want to do now? Or you can have the opposite where you say, after 5 years, open this up, for instance. There's no limit on the size or the number of files in a single object. And I guess, I'm sure there is some limit, but it's, we've deposited some really huge files and also some objects that have many, many, many files in them, small files, but many of them. And we haven't seen an issue with the application. Obviously, based on your infrastructure, that can create other problems, but the system doesn't seem to, it seems to allow kind of large objects. And then finally, the exit strategy is very clear for us. I mean, the data is stored as METs with absolute file paths in the METs. And so it's very, you have the METs on the server, you can just take them and, you can, it feels more transparent than some other databases. Slide. So now a couple of things that Rosetta is not going to give you. Right now, Ex Libris doesn't provide a hosted solution. So where you could install Rosetta on an Amazon web server or something, and you could host your file streams on the cloud. Ex Libris isn't going to provide that hosting in the way they do for Alma and Primo. This might be changing, not sure, but that's as far as I know, for right now, Ex Libris is not hosting. Rosetta is not meant as a metadata management system, so it does not provide robust metadata editing. You can edit metadata in Rosetta, but it's painful. And there are some kind of metadata update batch processes you can do, but it's not as straightforward as like a Alma normalization rule or something like that. It's not meant to be that. You can't choose the thumbnail that you want. So for when we publish to Primo, it goes with a little thumbnail, and it's just the first image that it comes across. So it's you can't choose that. And then also, as you might have guessed from the last couple of slides, Rosetta is not going to give you simplicity. It can require more staff time for management and configuration, and you have a lot more flexibility, but then that means that you have to kind of pay attention and be more responsible, especially considering you're dealing with preservation. And I think then now it's Anna's turn to talk about AlmaD.
Thank you. So these are AlmaD's features. It's all in the one system, so it's all part of your larger Alma instance. We get monthly release updates. If you read the release notes, they tend to come under digital resource management. Very simple workflows. We can use the same cataloging workflow that we use for ebooks or for print media. We can use the Alma metadata editor, which, having seen Rosetta's metadata editor, I can say is much better, much easier to use. We can choose which thumbnail we'd like to have, particularly for collections and for items. It's nice because we can pick, you know, the one that's going to display the digital object to its best advantage. As of the August 2017 release, so as of yesterday, Australian time, we've got two different viewers that we can use. We've got a default viewer, which will show you everything, or we've got a digital image viewer, which is IIIF compliant, and can display you TIFF files, which the default viewer cannot. It can only display TIFF files that are .tif, not .tiff. This is just something in the Alma coding, I guess, that it likes the older version of TIFF. I'm not quite sure why. And we've also external viewer plugins have been made available, again, new this release. Because this release only came out here yesterday and in Sandbox last week, I haven't got around to doing much testing of viewer plugins. As you can imagine, it hasn't really given me much time. I do have to mention with the IIIF viewer singular, sorry, there's not a great deal in the way of configuration. It's either on or it's off. When it's on, in the View It tab, you see two options to view your digital object. Unfortunately, we've got a lot of digital objects that are not image formats. We've got a lot of PDFs. All of our digitized books are currently as PDFs, all of our past exam papers, and the image viewer doesn't render these. And the last AlmaD feature is that it's all cloud hosted. So all you have to do is upload your files and your metadata, and all of the sort of preservation is not quite the right word, but it's all looked after by the Amazon web storage where it lives. What AlmaD doesn't address preservation. Everything you heard Teresa talk about in the previous slides is not something that AlmaD can do. It's an access system. So it's not somewhere you put things that you want to be able to look at 10, 20 years down the line. As I said, it's only got the two viewer options with the very limited configuration options. At the moment, here at RMIT, we've only got what they call the digital viewer turned on. We thought having both of them turned on would just confuse people, and until we can configure it to, say, having the image viewer on for our image collections, or even if we could map it maybe to a resource type, it's a little bit on the pointless side. Our end user deposit is very much not as mature or as complex as what you can do for Rosetta. You can put in something with a title, an author, and an abstract, and it just goes in. This is very much not enough metadata for our standards. There's certain APIs that you can use to configure this to be a bit more complicated, but that's not something that we've done at RMIT yet. There's no object hierarchy. Objects are just sort of flat as they are. And I don't want to say there's no exit strategy. We were told at Aluna that you can use an OAI PMH thing to extract everything, or at least to extract all the metadata, but it's definitely not as clear as it is in Rosetta with the lovely file paths in METS. So our recommendations are, if you have your preservation in another system, If you've already got Rosetta, or if you use another preservation system, but you only need digital asset management, you can use the AlmaD, works very well. If you can't host your own files and software, for whatever reason you just don't have the space on your own servers, or at RMIT it's kind of our IT policy not to host things locally, use the AlmaD. But if you'd like an all-in-one digital preservation solution with configurable external viewers and plugins, it's customizable and flexible, go for Rosetta. Any questions?
Okay, just a reminder that you need to unmute yourself or put something in the chat to ask questions.
Dave, you're not coming through.
Teresa, isn't the Triple viewers coming out for Rosetta soon? Like within the next couple of weeks?
Yes. Yes. So Rosetta out of the box will have a IIIF compliant viewer and server, I believe. Sometime in August, I think it's coming out.
Hi, Tony. We have migrated a lot of different kinds of materials. So we've migrated, actually it's mostly PDFs and JPEGs. We do have some issues viewing the files in AlmaD in that the viewer isn't, it's not really big enough to show an entire page of a PDF at once. There is a download option, so students can download anything that we've put up there. As I mentioned in the presentation, we do have issues viewing some files. The regular viewer won't display TIFF files, whereas the IIIF viewer will. And if you have something that's like a Word document or a spreadsheet, those will come up just as downloadable. They won't be sort of viewable in the viewer. I can show you a screencast, like a screenshot, if that will help.
I guess I could answer the next question from Rashmi, unless, did you want to show your screen or?
I'll just pull it up while you're answering the question, I think.
Okay. So Rosetta and AlmaD can be used in combination. There is a new AlmaD Rosetta integration that is now finally kind of more mature, and they've come out with an integration guide that you can get on the Knowledge Center. You can use AlmaD with Rosetta configured as a remote repository. So you would manage your metadata in Alma, and then you would publish from Alma to Primo. And then when you're in Primo, when you went to deliver the files, they would come up in a Rosetta viewer. And then preservation obviously would happen in Rosetta. So I don't know if there are simple ways. Your question, do I know if there are simple ways for data to be migrated between these systems? I don't know how simple it is, but I do know that there is a full circle. So you can deposit content in Alma, or you can deposit content in Rosetta, publish to Alma, and then you can edit metadata and resync it back into Rosetta. We haven't really tried that yet, although we plan to.
And I think I remember from Iluna that there is going to be a way, if you already have AlmaD and then you get Rosetta, you can migrate or push all of your AlmaD content into Rosetta to preserve it. Okay, I'm going to share my screen so you can see what the AlmaD looks like. Where are we? It's gonna look like that. Oh, that's just a slide. So this is what something looks like if it's not going to display in the viewer. It will also do that if your screen isn't big enough to display. Here we go. So this is what one of our digitised books from the Emily McPherson collection looks like. Here. And you asked if we put video in the AlmaD. We do, from our off-air and licensed video collection. And I can show you one right here. So you can put in MP3s, MP4s, PDFs and JPEGs, they're all okay. This will show our copyright notice first. See if I can scroll through that.
Every time.
Oh, there we go.
Take the money. They'll do me for corruption, but I pay for the bastards. Mate, it's just a couple of leather.
So that's what a movie looks like. Because the screen I'm working on is a conference room display screen, it's stretched out sideways, but they're normally sort of regular aspect size. Okay.
The next question looks like it's from Simon, asking me if we are using Primo for viewing and discovery of material in Rosetta, and the answer is yes. So we, for any content in Rosetta that's publishable, if it's not restricted, then we publish to Primo, and then we have some that are on-site viewing only, and then most of the material is available on-site. And again, for me, you mentioned ingesting into Rosetta as suppressed. Where was that configured? When you deposit something, there's a flag in the METs that we use to say active or suppressed, and so that will then suppress it from the Primo publish. Eric asks if Rosetta includes any automated integrity checks using the checksums to detect bit rot or other long-term preservation issues. It does. You can create a process that will run periodically to you can do a couple of things. You can either just check that the file is where it should be, that they call a I think it might be actually integrity check, or consistency checking. It doesn't actually get the file and create a checksum or check the checksum, but it just verifies the file is where it's supposed to be. And then you can also run full fixity checking, where you actually compute the checksum again and compare it to the checksum that was computed at the time of deposit and make sure they're the same. That gets a little tricky for us because we store our master files on tape. So if we were to then pull back the 140 terabytes of files to check them, that would cause a problem. So we actually do our fixity checking on the storage layer, not using Rosetta.
Okay, question from Dave Allen. How does AlmaD handle embargo periods and access right restrictions? Not very well is your short answer. I'm just going to share screen again to give you a look at what access rights look like. So here we're at the representation view. You can see here we've got access rights logged in. Alma comes with a couple of out-of-the-box sort of access groups, so you can have logged in, staff only, undergrad only, postgrad only, or you can create custom groups by adding in student numbers or staff numbers individually. As you can imagine, this is not something I'm going to do for every course group if there's something restricted to that course. So most things that we have are restricted to logged in users, and some things that are in what we call our dark archives that are only staff can use, we have them restricted to only digitisation staff. Hope that answered your question.
I guess one that we kind of skipped is another from Eric, asking if Rosetta detects a checksum error if we need to do a manual replacement of the file. And yes, we would. So we currently have 3 copies of the files. So we would have to replace it with another copy.
And Tony asked if it's all right to get in touch with me about using AlmaD with Leganto. Yes, please do. We are, because all of our course readings are online and we're moving them from our legacy system into the AlmaD, we're currently working out what the workflow is going to be for figuring out copyright, etc. on AlmaD records. Yep, so feel free to send me an email for that. Do you want to answer Rashmi's question, or I can answer it, or we both can?
I guess I can just say that that we did look into using collections discovery in Primo. As Anna was saying, you can publish both from AlmaD or from Rosetta collections hierarchy into Primo. But because we're actually moving into IIIF for our access, we went the route of creating IIIF collections. And so we're going to provide a different way to browse collections and not really go any further with the Primo collections browse.
So yes, we are using the collection discovery. I think what you mean is sort of what they're using, calling the collection lobby or something like that. I can show you what that looks like. So if you go to RMIT's library page and click on digital collections, you'll see something that looks a bit like this. You can go in. There's a lot of clicks, which is very Alma thing to do. Click in again. And here we go. You'll notice it goes in between the old and new Primo UIs. Digital collections, unfortunately, is not yet in part of the new Primo UIs, so it will look like the old one until you get to the item level, and then it will look like new Primo again. And this is what everything looks like. Voila. I won't wait for that to load. That's quite boring. Okay.
I could be brave and try to share my screen so you can also get a sense of the way our Rosetta collections look in Primo. So I don't know. Let's see. Are you seeing my screen?
Yes.
Yep, we can see it.
Great. So if you just go to primo.getty.edu, you can search our collections. And if you want to limit your search to only the digital collections, you can do that. So here, when you're clicking on View Online, you're getting the Rosetta viewer. This is not a very interesting image. It's a dark room, but you get the idea. And I guess, let's see if I can find a more interesting one that has more hierarchy, but just quickly to show you what I meant about the kind of complex hierarchy, I'll show you one that has a lot of description. So here is what I was talking about. On the left-hand side, you'll see that they've transcribed the captions for each of these images, and so it's almost like a little finding aid of sorts that has all the images. So that's the kind of thing that we required as part of our digital environment, and so that's why we use METs for deposit. And I will stop sharing. Question about publishing from Eric. Is the publish to Primo from Rosetta done via OAI PMH? We do, yes. I think you could also write, like you could do NFS and then just point Primo to that, but we do ours through OAI PMH.
Are there any more questions then? No? Then I would like to thank both Anna and Teresa on your behalf. Oh, we do have a new one. Oh, great presentation. Exactly. I'd like to thank Teresa and Anna on your behalf for a fantastic presentation, and it's given us a lot to think about as well. So thank you, both of you.
Thank you for having us and for asking us to do the presentation for you.
Yes, happy to share.